the studio of your mom's basement comes a podcast by two idiots in a revolving door of legends and has-beens from the oldest university in Texas. This is Purple, Gold, and Getting Old.
All right. So, Garrett, today we're getting ready to do an episode that I've been pumped on and wanting to do for a long time about just ministry majors and everything that you learn there and whatnot. And so I was a very mediocre ministry major, I will say. But Eddie Kahler, who we've got on the podcast today, is just like really, and I'm not to blow smoke, man, but when I talk about like some great ministry majors, both like academically, but also just spiritually. You were younger than me, but I looked up to you, Eddie. I really did. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
It's because he grew up in the holiest hometown in the world.
Yeah. So let's
next to Clarendon, Texas.
Y'all two, even though you were gone by the time Eddie got there, y'all already knew each other. So what was that about?
So Eddie's older sister was in my graduating class. So, and we grew up in the same church. So, and cool. Were you in my sister's class or the year? No, you graduated like the year before her, something like that.
I graduated high school 2010.
2010. Oh, so you were
the year before her.
Okay, yeah. Couple of years, yeah, because I think she was like, a couple of years after that. I lose track after. My mother always asks, "Hey, did you know so and so in high school?" I'm like, "When were they there?" And she's like, "Oh, one of my last students." I'm like, I was 12 years gone by the time.
No, I was a student of your mother's for a couple of years too in high school. Your mother is the one who actually suggested I look into UMHB.
Oh, look at that!
I didn't know that.
That's amazing. All right.
She's in the other room. I'm gonna have to pull the Will Ferrell from Wedding. Go, Mom. Shout out.
Well, that's Eddie. You going where I was already going. So other than Garrett's mom, what brought you all the way down from Canyon to?
Is that gonna be a trend now? We just start talking about my mom on podcast.
Hey man, we gotta have her on the podcast at some point.
It's in the works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of stretches back into really my call to ministry, because at the time when I was looking for colleges, I knew I wanted to go down this path, and I didn't really know after college or what was coming forward, but I knew at least I wanted to pursue ministry. So I looked at a few schools, religious private schools, to try to figure out what. At the time, my youth minister, who was super influential in my life, he kind of challenged me, "Hey, if this is what you think God is calling you to, go for it." Some other folks said, "Get a business degree." That may have been a good idea, looking back. Other folks said, "Get communications." He challenged me to go for it. So I looked for ministry or religious kind of degrees, and I was actually all set to go to Lubbock Christian, which was a real tiny school. And
okay, Nathan Berryman and I drove past it the other day, and we still didn't see it. The sign was like, "It's right there." We're like, "Where?"
My best friend at the time thought he was going there too, and then when he backed out, there was no chance I was going there. Yes. So I was kind of scrambling at the last minute in the spring semester. And it was Mrs. Smith that told me about UMHB and check it out. And kind of when I compared it to some other different like degrees and things, I thought, that's what I'm after. That's what I want. So worked out.
I love that. I had no idea that was per mom's recommendation.
That's really
and I that actually brings me to a question I've been dying to ask since Tyler told me you were going to be on here, was how did you still go there after spending a preview weekend with our group?
That's a good question.
I was going to say earlier, it was probably for my spiritual benefit that Garrett was gone by the time I got there. I think, in all honesty, we had a blast on that preview weekend. I stayed with you and Andy and Nathan, and it honestly probably helped solidify a lot of it. This was going to be a fun place to be at, and even though there weren't many of us from Canyon out there, just seeing someone else have a good time was helpful.
We talked about that with Grant Hickman last week, and I don't know if you knew Grant, because if he was a senior when I was a freshman, so he was like way older than you, but we talked about how it was like the Sith Lords. When he and I were there were two. Then he graduated, and we had a basketball player come in, and there were
Yep.
2, and then she transferred out, and then there were 3 of us because Brett Land and
Brett
Tracy
Land,
Bird came
yeah.
in.
Yeah, they were
Yeah,
there
so
for
you
a while
kept
while
it.
I was there.
You kept it
Yeah.
going.
That's right. And look what happened.
Well, it cracks me up. So like for anyone wondering, like, well, what'd they do to that guy? Kane Taylor and I used to do this thing called Dare Nights with our group, where we would just come up with this stupid scavenger hunt list.
I forgot about those.
Yeah.
Oh
And
my goodness.
let's just put it this way, if it were a fraternity, it would have been textbook hazing, except our group of friends was a bunch of idiots who were like, let's do this. What could possibly go wrong? Thank the Lord Snapchat and all that didn't exist back then. But one of the things was go to there was a group of girls there called the Katies, because like 80% of them were named Katie. And it was like, all right, go to their apartment, bust in shirtless and party boy somebody. And so the plan was Kane and I were going to go in by ourselves. We bust in. Jeff Payne opened the door. He's like, what are y'all doing here? He's like, shh, who's home? He's like, some people in the back. So we run back there, and I'm not sorry, but I'm still going to apologize to Kimberly Jones and Kathleen Shelton if you happen to hear this. We ran into their room. We did the party boy thing, and I turn around, and lo and behold, Eddie has joined us, and no one knew who he was. So he's saying, who am I? Who am I? And so at that point, Kane and I lose our composure laughing, and we just beeline out the door. And I was like, oh no, this guy's never going to go to school here. Or we solidified it.
That's right.
You know, we should have had Eddie open up the episode going, who am I?
Who am I? that can be the title we upload. Eddie Kahler. Who is he?
Yeah, who am I?
That's right. Thankfully, those dots were only connected once during my time there, and it was very brief, and I hope the person didn't quite fully catch on to it.
Well, it's funny. I drove those girls nuts, man. Like it was always one thing after, but at the end of the day, it was all love, and so they knew I put you up to it. Even though I really didn't. I didn't know you were going in too. So Eddie, I have to ask you something before we really get into this. My sister posted something on Instagram the other day, and she just kind of put an open question to all Canyonites. And even though this is something that I was outraged about, I didn't know that it was apparently still just a huge hot take and hot button issue for people after I left. Donuts in Canyon. I am of the group who was halfway through high school. I was a sophomore in high school when Krispy Kreme came to Amarillo, and we're like, this is dope. Like, people went there for their prom dinner before going to prom. Like, we were stoked. And when I found out that they were closing down because I couldn't keep up with Donut Stop, I'm getting worked up right now just talking about it. I'm still offended. It's outrage. So I want to hear your take on Donuts in Canyon and who your go-to is.
It's all Donut Stop, Garrett. You just get over it, man. That's all there is to it. That's what it's always been, what it's always going to be. Donut Stop.
I know. I have a song called Panhandle Wind, and I made a Donut Stop reference in it. It hurt to do it. I'm still mad.
Just a name change, or was it like a chain that took over a small? What's the
no? There was this like Amarillo based chain called Donut Stop, and dude, it was like if you took a biscuit, sprinkled some sugar on it, and just kind of fried it up. And then if you put red icing on it and called it cherry, and it would spill all over all the other donuts in the box. So half your donuts had red on them. And that's what everyone at the Methodist church ate in their classrooms. The cake donuts, the blueberry were okay, but really, here was my saving grace. This is where I'll meet Donut Stop halfway. You're hard pressed to find a better donut than the blueberry cake at Donut Stop in Canyon, Texas. But that's like having a Heisman quarterback on just a garbage football team. You're still not going to win a championship. Well,
the PGO podcast, come for memories of life as a Crusader, stay for the donut.
That's right.
So, Eddie,
I'm kidding. Donut Stop. We need sponsors.
Yeah. So you grew up Methodist, but you came to a Baptist school. Was there a reason there? What was the thinking there in coming to a Baptist school, or was there not much thinking there? It just didn't matter that much to you?
No, it was a couple of things. I've always kind of been a hodgepodge living between both. My mother grew up Southern Baptist in Georgia. My dad grew up United Methodist in Pennsylvania. So I've always just kind of had a little bit of mix running through me. But when I was looking at different schools, I was really looking at the degrees offered. And a lot of I looked at TCU, which is where I work. I don't work for TCU. That's one thing they're very clear on. But I worked there. I looked at TCU. I looked at some of their Methodist schools, and more often than not, they were offering kind of world religion degrees. And I think what really hooked me on UMHB was this Christian ministry emphasis, and really set up as a baby degree, which is not to belittle it. It's really, really great stuff, to where you actually get into Greek and Hebrew and preaching and ministry and all sorts of like worship classes. It was what I was after. So
That's cool.
Yeah,
So-
I remember taking a quick look at Methodist schools when I was graduating. I was like, let's see, McMurray, nope. SMU, no, that's just Baylor with more perfume. I'm good.
Well, if you wanted a purple Methodist school that won a lot of football games, I know a place in Ohio y'all could have gone, but good.
I always
choice.
forget they're Methodist.
Yeah. Well, they're
far.
not anymore. They actually, they decided to disaffiliate.
Wait, does that mean they're not Methodist, or they're like
no, this
global?
has nothing to do with the global.
Oh, okay.
Split.
Yeah,
they-
SMU
a lot of
split
schools
a long time
went
ago.
out
Yeah.
of religious connections.
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Technically Christian University.
So normally I save these questions for last, but I kind of want to jump into them first, so we can just like go from school ministry stuff to like ministry stuff. So while you were at UMHB, what was the favorite tradition that you were able to take part in?
Ooh, Easter pageant. I know it's a little cliche to say, maybe, but
Yeah.
it really is. It really is something neat. It's really something special,
Yeah.
especially now having been to a few other different schools and spending time with other schools. The fact that UMHB makes that a priority, could it be adapted? Sure. Could it be updated? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
They have.
but the message that I think that's great that they do that, and it gave me some of my really close friends too.
That's cool.
So,
Did you ever have any roles, or was that what you were gonna say?
Yeah, that's what I was exactly what I was gonna say.
well, my freshman year, I was picked as one of the disciples.
Oh,
I
nice.
think Mark Miller was Jesus, and he was
Jesus saves.
Saves.
that's right. Yeah. So I jumped into Hebrew my freshman year, and I was like, I'm going to get ahead of this and go to tutoring right away instead of later. And Mark, I got to know him as a Hebrew tutor, and so got to spend time with him. Later on, I was one of the high priests, and then my third year, I got to be on the planning team or something. So
Cool.
You did both Hebrew and Greek, right?
I did. Yeah, I was
So did
the
you have to
biblical
have the
languages
overlap
minor.
year where you did like Hebrew 1? Oh, dude, how did you survive that?
You have to do. I did Hebrew 2 and Greek 1 at the same time. I don't know. Honestly, looking back, I mean, we must have been pretty lucky that Belton could have been a little bit more boring than other places. 'Cause I don't know how to made it. There's a lot to it. But
It's actually a problem now. There's a lot more to do here.
right. Good friends. We would help each other out. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what was there a tradition that you didn't take part in, but you wish you would have been able to, if you maybe would have not been taking Greek and Hebrew at the same time?
Well, I mean, I got to do crew nights.
Yeah.
That was a blast. It was really by a kind of a default reason from, like, I guess the Hebrew had an honor society or something. I got an entry. That's the only way I could have gotten an entry into crew nights.
That's right. There was the Hebrew fraternity, right? Yes, I remember that. Okay.
See, Tyler always just needed an out of crew nights.
Yeah.
No problem getting in.
So I don't know. I feel like I got a really great experience, and I don't feel like I was all books all the time, because I think that's important. And no, looking back, I wouldn't have changed anything. So.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. What was your favorite memory in regards to sports? Do you have a favorite sports memory, rather on the field or off the field shenanigans?
Yeah, no, it had to have been, I guess my freshman year when we drove out to Louisiana College. The win, actually, that was a really close game. So it was not only was the game super competitive and super exciting, but just road tripping for football. That was just a blast.
That's always fun.
I remember following y'all's pictures, like the
Yeah.
updates the whole time.
Was that did y'all go out with Andy on that trip and Abby and all them in the red truck?
Yeah, I
Big
think
red.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a crew of
There's-
us, a couple cars, I think. We kind
Okay.
of
There is
caravan.
down the street from my parents, there is a red F-350 that's always parked in this driveway. And every time we drive by, I'm just like, nostalgic.
I love it. So when I think back to my time as a Christian studies major, the some of the biggest stuff I think about is like how influential professors were for me, spiritually and academically. Like there were literally times where I was in class and Dr. Hood was just giving a lecture, and I'm like feeling the spirit moving in me and convicting me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm more moved right now than like a sermon I've ever been at. Like this is incredible. And so did you have any professors or any particular memories as being a Christian studies major that just really hit you in a powerful way that like really affected you well outside the classroom?
Again, it's probably a little cliche to say, but almost all of them in
Yeah.
different ways. I remember what you're talking about with Dr. Hood, but I did not do well in her classes. So, Dr. Martin, who taught Greek.
I did not do well in his classes.
Let's be real. He was a hard, but he was such a lovable guy. Like
I know.
he
Oh, my
cared so deeply.
He did.
And even when you get to the end, I remember him inviting everybody over to his house for breakfast, just to celebrate. So I definitely would lift up him. Probably Dr. Carroll, big time. Dr. Carroll taught discipleship and worship. And I remember in my last year, I graduated in December, so I don't know exactly when this took place, but I remember he agreed to meet with me one-on-one and just do discipleship, talk about life, read scripture together, pray for each other. So that I still think about that. That was huge. Dr. Kemp answered all my "what are these Baptists" questions that I had.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I may have said this on the podcast before, but when he was the interim pastor at FBC Salado for like a year, if I had had a long week and not quite enough coffee, there was nothing harder than staying awake with that voice. Just like, it was like reading a bedtime story, just chock full of theology. And I'm just like, I'm trying to absorb this wisdom, but I'm going to go sleep.
When me and Andy flew up to Wisconsin a couple weeks ago for that game, Dr. Kemp was there. In the stands with us, and when we were down at the last drive, almost was like, all right, Dr. Kemp, you need to lead a prayer circle and a precatory prayer over the it's Whitewater. Oh man,
What a guy. That's awesome. I'm glad
We'd have won.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, speaking of Dr. Hood too, if you want to feel old, Eddie, a couple weeks ago we actually had Dr. Hood's son on the podcast, who's now one of the couch crew captains at UMH.
Wow. Let's go. Very good.
Shout out Keanu.
I know. And then I totally did not even realize that that's who he was until after the podcast. I'm like, dude, I'm so mad now. I would have had like so many questions about his mom. So he's probably thankful.
Oh my gosh. I would not have passed biblical backgrounds if not for my wife. Let me just make that very clear.
that was a tough one. So did you
there's a question. How'd you meet your wife?
Well, yeah, we met welcome week, day one. We were in the same group. She was wearing Duke sweatpants, so I thought maybe she's a Methodist. Maybe there could be a little something here.
Foreshadowing there.
There you go.
It turns out her family is just diehard Dukies, but no, we got to meet and started dating that year. So,
but eventually, you became a rare case of a Duke fan that actually had an affiliation with Duke.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. It came full circle because going to seminary there, we got into a few basketball games and even got to take her parents to one or two. So
that's cool.
I earned some major brownie points then.
I bet you did.
And I almost got to come stay with you whenever my truck got slammed into a wall after the Stag Bowl.
I remember that. That's right. Yes. We were so hoping that UMHB would come to the Stag Bowl while we were in North Carolina because it just made too much sense to get over there. So lucked out.
Weekend in 16 was super fun. I got to come hang out with Eddie a little bit. He showed me all around Duke, and I'm like, this place is magical.
Dude, I was up there a year ago in like 3 weeks, and there's just nothing like, you know, the leaves changing in that area, and like Raleigh Durham is just amazing, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I'll start missing it.
You know, one of my best friends who went to UMHB as well. I worked with him at a Baptist church right out of school. He's a Methodist though, and he's at has been in a Methodist church. He was seriously looking at Duke, and he told me that he's like, you know, actually, I talked to a UMHB student who went there, and he helped me out. I'm like, oh, what was his name? He goes, Eddie. I'm like, I know an Eddie. It's Colton Hedrick. Yeah, called you up a while ago.
He was on the podcast once.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast with Cameron Reclue. So we've had a lot of there was a lot of Methodists at UMHB, or at least
dude didn't even know what the Stag Bowl was.
Anyway, yeah. So so did you take Martin for Greek? Is that, or did you have Hood for Greek?
I had Martin.
You had Martin. Ooh, dude.
I think one of his last classes, because it wasn't too much longer either when we graduated or afterwards that he retired. So
gotcha. Okay. I ended up having Hood for Greek. But I can't remember what I had Martin for, but I remember he would always, even if you got the right answer, if you misspelt it, then it's completely wrong. And I remember
the man had standards.
He did. I remember one semester I could never for the life of me spell Mediterranean right, and it was on every quiz that I had. And I was like, wait, how many T's, how many D's? Oh, it was so frustrating. But I will, you know, like you said about how caring he was, I really went through some issues with anxiety and depression, and insomnia, where I was not sleeping at night at UMHB, just panic attacks, just all sorts of just some big issues where I didn't
cause them.
No, you did not
throw that out there.
And where like I would just have so much anxiety and just issues I had going on, where I would just like skip out of class for a week, just like I wouldn't leave my dorm room. It was really bad. And so obviously my grades started to suffer because of that. And I remember Dr. Martin bringing me into his office, and he was like, hey, and it was essentially like, I see what you have done here, and this is solid, good stuff. But then I see that you just like don't care about this. Is there anything going on in your life? And I wasn't really comfortable talking so much about what I was going through, but because it was just so direct, and it was in his office, and I was like, yes. And I was like, found myself like just opening up about it to him, and he was so amazing. And not even just Dr. Hood as well, really went above and beyond and out of her way to help me out when I was going through a lot of these issues. That's the thing that sticks out for me about the professors that I had. And this is probably in every program, but I do like to think the Christian Studies program is one of the better ones at UMHB. That how much they cared for you outside of the classroom. It just, I wouldn't have made it through had I not had professors that that had a concern for me, because they could have easily just been like 0, 0, 0, bye, you know, sorry. That was powerful. So what experiences did you have in ministry that were provided to you at UMHB while you were there?
Oh my. So, you know, I was a little bit atypical in the sense that I didn't work at a church. Like I know some people just dive in and go straight forward to like doing that kind of stuff. I did help with some different youth ministries, but primarily the experience that I got and that I would look back on was part of the degree. And I hope it's still the same way, but you had to do some sort of kind of church internship as part of the requirements for one class. I can't remember which one, but I got to spend some time with First Methodist Temple and get to know the pastors there. And you know, honestly, they were so gracious to me because I really wasn't doing much, but they let me in on much, if that makes sense. So I got
to go there for the first time the other day.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's
beautiful old building. I loved it.
It is. That's where we would go to church. After a while, I mean, I hopped quite a bit the first couple of years, but we eventually landed there. That's where my wife and I got married. And yeah, they they let me in. I wasn't good for nothing at the time, but they were gracious enough to let me watch and let me observe and let me question things. So
That was kind of my experience the one time. They were having their disaffiliation vote, and we were just kind of there to like help check people in, and just as a fellow church, we wanted to offer support. And but everyone's downstairs except like the 5 of us from my church, and we're up in that balcony. And so it's like, oh, that meme where the guy is like looking up and judging down below.
no, I know what you're talking about, especially that one that's kind of slanted forward,
looking down.
Yeah.
So after UMHB, you go to Duke Divinity. Did you go straight from UMHB to Duke, or did you have a gap between your undergrad and your MDiv?
A short gap. I graduated December 13,
Okay.
and then I was a valet driver and worked some like other jobs.
Nice.
Laura, my wife, graduated in May of 14, and then we got married. We loaded up everything in a U-Haul and moved out there and started fall of that fall. So
yeah. So what was your experience at Duke like?
So I mean, right off the bat, we were in culture shock because here we were leaving what is a generally, I don't even say this in a negative way, a generally conservative, bubbly type of Christianity and school. At least during our time, there was still rules around visitation and alcohol, student conduct. So for us to show up at Duke and find beer and wine after opening convocation, a bar on campus, and an opening MDiv pastors party with bring your own liquor, we were just absolutely lost. And so what
in
we
your
did,
face, Wake Forest.
it was so funny because some of our best friends from seminary, we met at that big house, that first big initial house party where I saw, I was like, all these people are gonna be pastors? There's so much beer and so much liquor. And so Laura and I naturally just gravitate to like, a corner, right? Find me somewhere, help me hug a wall. And funny enough, we met another couple that had graduated from a small, I think D3 Baptist college. And oh, this is where you're comfortable too. So let's be friends.
Dude, I like to tell people that Carolina is the Texas of non-Texas states, because it's like you can draw so many parallels. It's funny you mentioned like being from a small conservative area. I think I was telling Tyler and Andy the other day, I said, if you look at a political map of either state, it's kind of funny. It's all red, but the 2 big areas are blue, and then you got the southern border is blue. It's like almost the same map as Texas. And then like every major university pretty much has a Texas twin that matches its personality. I mean, the parallels are endless.
Dude, I didn't realize how similar the flags were until the summer.
Yeah,
we did our annual mission trip in the Appalachian Mountains, and we're driving through this little town, and they have like a big flag waving, and I see it. I'm like, wow, there must be a Texan here. They love Texans. I feel so welcome. Only to learn, I'm like, no, I'm an idiot.
When a few years ago we looked at moving out there, Hannah and me, and I sat down and I drew a line down a page. I just started making the parallels. It's like, okay, Bucky's, Sheets, these schools all have a twin. There's like East Carolina, Texas Tech. You had like every little cultural thing out there has some sort of parallel you can draw. That's UMHB, Elon.
So did you find that it was beneficial to you to get an education in like 2 varied, like on one end a fairly conservative school? I mean, it's not Liberty, but it's pretty conservative, and then also a fairly liberal school as well. Did you find any way that they were able to complement each other?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's what education is.
Yeah.
Exposing yourself to ideas and ways of thinking. And I'm grateful for it. Do I completely and perfectly line up with either? No. But nor do I think that, many of us necessarily should.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no, I was really fortunate. And it was also just like the makeup of the schools too were different. I remember at UMHB, a lot of my classmates were Baptist and non-denominational.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them. And I remember even in class, sometimes, sometimes the professors would look at me like, okay, give us like a token different take. Give us a Methodist take or something. Whereas in seminary, there were so many different backgrounds and traditions represented, which was really good, because I think we get closer to the picture being more clear when we put more backgrounds and traditions into it.
Interesting. So it wasn't mainly just Methodist students. There's a wide array.
No, yeah, there's a wide array. I think they've got to admit a certain number of Methodist students because of their affiliation, which may or may not have helped my experiences. But no, they've got Episcopalians, they've got Roman Catholics. One of my professors there was Eastern Orthodox.
Oh wow!
They've got some Islamic students. They have Pentecostals. I mean, just anything you could imagine is probably represented there.
It's always interesting, you know, like they talk about, you don't have to go to Haiti or Africa to have a mission field. I mean, y'all had Chapel Hill right there to go witness to. I just think that's so cool.
Yeah.
You know, I can't think of his name right now, but I'm sure if I was able to look it up, you'd be able to find him. I every year go to the midwinter lectures at Austin Seminary. And one year when I went there, they had one of the speakers was a professor at, I think he was a professor. He definitely worked at Duke Divinity, but his background was out of the African Baptist Church. And he preached one of the most powerful sermons I remember ever hearing, just about the importance of bodies and the Imago Dei. And this would have been, golly, probably 2019 or something. So you'd have graduated, but you know, probably in that time frame. So I'm gonna have to look him up and see if you know who he is.
Well, you know, I wonder if it was Luke Powery.
That's the name. Yes, that's totally it. Yeah.
So and to tie this all together, it's kind of interesting. So I had him for preaching at Duke Divinity, and yeah, completely powerful, and exposed us to different kind of preaching styles and varieties. I think what's interesting about holding that next to UMHB is, and I don't mean this as a dog to either, right? But it, whatever. Duke taught me how to think, and UMHB taught me how to do.
Ooh, I like that.
There's a lot of abstract theoretical stuff that we did at Duke, and that really stretched me in ways that maybe UMHB didn't. But there are a lot of practical, get the job done, Monday to Friday or Monday to Sunday work that may have been absent at my time at Duke. So really, I mean, I could not be more grateful for having both and. So
you just answered a question that I asked Grant Hickman on the last episode, and that was kind of like about outside of the classroom experience and just how UMHB helped him, to do just that in his career. So, folks, I actually unfortunately have to leave here in a minute, but I have just a couple of questions for Eddie. One is, I also attended another university after going to UMHB, and most people do, but for some reason when I do it, it just triggers everybody. So I get annoyed with this question. I finally get to ask somebody else. UMHB versus Duke in a sporting event, who do you take?
Never gonna happen.
Well, that is the Garrett Smith answer right there.
But UMHB.
It's
UMHB.
There you go.
You gotta give props to where you come from.
Isn't it such an annoying question though? Like, come on. I liken it to this because I asked my sister one time, I was like, would you like more, Baylor or Asbury Seminary? Or is it apples to oranges? She said apples to oranges. I tell people I like my truck and I like my boots. They both get me places. You can't take one on the dance floor and you can't take one out on I-35. So each one served a purpose.
I didn't have nearly as much time to go to sports in grad school I did at UMHB. So
yeah,
that's why I chose a grad school that doesn't have a sports team.
Hey, you can always get that doctorate from Tennessee.
That's right. That's right.
Now that they have sports worth watching. So the other question, and this, I hate to go like this far back jumping around, but this is another Canyon one. On the last episode, Grant Hickman and I had something in common, that we were both in the Purple Posse when we were in high school. And something that you and I have in common is I believe we were both members of the loading crew.
That's right.
So I have to ask, did the chant still happen on the trailer?
Absolutely. I couldn't say one word from the chant now, but because it's so far back. But I remember.
Certain useless things stick in your head.
Load. All we do is
load. We tied a knot. We tied your mom. Pit, come get your Now I won't say the last word because that's a $2 fine.
You're good with we tied your mom, but not that.
Well, touche. Anyhow, on that note, Tyler's sitting here like, what is with these
Yeah, I
Canyon
was like, I
people?
have no clue what we're talking about.
It's we grew up in the desert. We had to find ways to entertain ourselves. All right, Eddie, great to see you.
Good to see you, Garrett.
Tyler, I guess it's all right to see you too.
Yeah.
I will see all of y'all later.
All right, go be a dad.
Yeah.
All right, so
Thank God for editing.
yeah, I know, right? Oh my goodness. I liked what you said about Duke taught you how to think, and Mary Harn Baylor taught you how to do. Right now I work at a reformed former UCC church that's kind of got one foot in mainline Protestantism, but a little bit one foot in evangelicalism as well. And I just think even beyond schools, I think mainline Protestants are really great about thinking really intelligently and deeply. And I think the strength of evangelicals is they're just like, well, let's just go out and do something,
That's right. Yeah.
So kind of on that thought of, just getting out there and doing stuff, but having that knowledge, as you're, in the background for you. What have you been doing since Duke Divinity, and how has what you've learned, played into the ministry that you're doing?
Yeah. So when I graduated seminary in the Methodist Church, we run on appointments, meaning that the bishop of our regional area assigns or appoints people to serve as pastors. So I got appointed to a church in Fort Worth as an associate pastor, and we moved, not knowing where we would end up. We moved here, and I was at that church for 3 years. Learned so much. I mean, I could also point to just getting on the ground and trying stuff that how much you learn. And honestly, I was really grateful for that associate role, because some of my buddies went straight to like a small senior pastor role or something like that. Man, I would be lost if I hadn't had a couple of senior pastors along the way just literally show me, stand here, walk this way, do this. When you go to a funeral, you go here. Stuff, very practical things. I enjoyed my time, and after 3 years, the bishop reappointed me to the Wesley Foundation at TCU, which is a campus ministry. It was something I was really passionate about for a couple of reasons. It might have had to do with that there didn't seem to be at the time at UMHB what I felt like was a campus ministry that I could fully kind of get behind or get with. At the time I felt like there were some theological perspectives lacking, and anyway, so I've always kind of been interested in being that for others. So that was exciting. I'm starting my 3rd year now working with college students, which I love because they ask so many good questions that church members who maybe have been going to church their entire lives, they're not asking the same questions.
Absolutely. So what you do is essentially the Methodist version of what like the BSM and Sean Shannon would have been at UMHB?
Yeah, no, that'd be very comparable. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Working with that age people, is there any kind of consistent themes of things that you're encountering, and things that they're questioning, or things that they're struggling with, or things that they're going through that's specific to that kind of age range?
Yeah, I think so. What I find myself trying to get across more often than not is, they're in college. They just worked so tremendously hard to get to college, filling out all the resumes and all the FAFSAs and all the essays and all that.
A shiver just went down my spine when you said FAFSA.
Oh yeah, no, they've swung it earlier. You got to fill it out in October now. Anyway, they get to college, and then the competition just rages on, right?
Yeah.
One of the books I just finished reading that really recommend, Low Anthropology, David Zoll. He said he works with college students, and they've pretty much told him that college is either a series of audiences to impress, or a series of battles of which anybody could be your enemy or your ally, and don't let anyone see you fail.
Wow.
So what I find is the message that we get to speak into that is God has redeemed you and saved you and loves you, not for what you can accomplish here, or despite how you may fail here.
Yeah. You know, one of the
pretty much rings true.
Yeah. One of the things I'm always asking anyone involved in any sort of ministry on here, not just because it's interesting, but because I just want to know for myself, and I'm fascinated by it, is just, you know, you see all these stats about just the irreligiosity. I don't know if that's the word, but I'm going to coin it if it's not, of, you know, younger generations, really even our generation, but, you know, especially Gen Z as they're coming up. What are you finding that is attracting them to faith, and what do you find is kind of repelling them away from faith?
So I think what's interesting, same author, different book,
Okay.
Seculosity.
That's another word. That's a good word. I like that.
That is a made up word.
Yeah.
And what he does in that book is he says, yeah, we're seeing all these trends and all these charts about how people are less religious.
Mm-hmm.
But what he argues is, no, people are just as religious as they've always been. It's just not pointed at Christianity anymore. Because now our religions take place in politics and at the gym. And are you eating the right thing? And are you parenting the right way? And we have made our rituals and our membership and our right and wrong and confession and pardon around so many other things. So I think what's attractive is to invite people into, yes, a religion that, when you really understand it, you know that Christ has covered you even when you get it all wrong.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's what I haven't read that book. I'm putting it on my list now though. But I've seen in studies too, and read as well, that that's essentially what's happening. I saw a study recently that was, it asked people, and it split them into ages. You know, how often do you go to church? And it was, as you think, the older you are, the more often you go to church, and, you know, boom. But then it asked, how often do you have a spiritual conversation?
Yeah.
And the line was exactly the opposite. You know, I used to think, and I feel like even as thinking about like youth group and maybe even college stuff, the way that we were told to attack this sort of, and it was like attack language is very much used, that kind of war language, right? Was about like proving that there's truth, like this is true, and like winning these debates. And what I found is like people aren't leaving faith because they're like, no, scientifically I think this and that. That's really not it. Because a lot of the nuns like have crystals, you know, and they're really into their you know, whatever their birth signs are and all that. It's just different, right?
Apologetics has totally shifted away from the question of, is Christianity true? And now it's asking the question, is Christianity good?
Yeah.
And I find that the college students, I mean, when I walked in, you had people that grew up in church their entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let's do a Bible study. And, you know, you're working against a generation and a culture that you have to prove, like, is it even good to read your Bible? Because there's some pretty wacky stuff in there.
Yeah.
So.
You know what I've found is a lot of people, there's so much baggage that has been attached to Christianity by other people that they're almost not rejecting the message of the gospel. They're rejecting all the baggage that's been attached to it.
Sure. Yeah.
And when you are able to present them the gospel in a really for the first time in a way that doesn't have that baggage and is just like straight the message of just reconciliation and redemption. I find a lot of people go, oh, well, like actually I kind of like that, but that's not what I grew up with.
Yeah. And it takes more time, I think, because they got to sit with you and spend some time with you to really feel it out. Just make sure, are you not just selling me on this, but is it real?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a new pastor we're about to install, and I was listening to one of his older sermons the other day, and he was talking about a new approach to apologetics. And he told a story that I'd never heard before. And I'm like, I don't know how I didn't, because if you look up there, I got like that whole shelf is Tolkien right there, about how C.S. Lewis wanted to have some sort of big debate with somebody. And Tolkien basically kept telling him, that's pointless, like, and lame, like, don't do that. And Cecil's like, no, I can argue him into it. And he goes and he has this big public debate and gets absolutely smashed. And so he goes back to Tolkien, and what Tolkien essentially says is, it's not through arguing into people, but it's through basically telling them a story, like presenting them the story. And that's essentially then C.S. Lewis went and wrote Chronicles of Narnia after that. And I was like, that's amazing. Because I do think it's about telling a story of reconciliation. So yeah.
But that's even what you and I need, right? Like I know the story, and yet I still veer off, and like I know the arguments, I know I know this is how God says God works, but I don't buy it. I gotta have someone else speak it into my life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we all need.
Yeah, that's I think was it I know it's a Bonhoeffer book. I think it's Life Together by Bonhoeffer, where he basically says a Christian community is basically Christians consistently preaching the gospel to one another, that we need to always be hearing the gospel and be speaking the gospel to one another. That reminds me of. That's really powerful. Well, cool, man. Thank you for coming on. This has been fun. So before we go, is there any other story from your time at UHB that we didn't get to that you're dying to tell or recount for us?
No, there's only stories I wish not to share.
I understand the sentiment.
No, I love UHB, still do. They set us up for success, and I don't regret any bit of it. So very grateful for them.
So you feel like you going into Duke Divinity, you feel like they really set you up for success at Duke and life in ministry as well?
Yeah, I mean, God willing, somehow I made it. So
absolutely. Well, Eddie, it was good. It was good catching up with you, man. Good luck to all the work you're doing in your ministry, and keep fighting that good fight, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
For having me.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. All right, see ya.